All right, we are back here on the podcast. Talk about the year that was. Very busy year in New York sports. Like look back at some of the most interesting moments of the year on the podcast. Join me today, great friend of the podcast, Dan DeMartini is here. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. I feel like it's crazy to kind of see how many years and how many different things happen. You kind of forget. So I love coming back and doing a clip show because there's so many awesome moments to relive. So let's do this thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on here. And I kind of go through the year, like picked out some of the highlights of the podcast, like some good predictions. We got some reaction to things in the New York sports world, some big names stopped by. So we'll touch on a little variety pack here.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna go from fun here all the way back to January, kick it out here because we had a little, this year was not good for my Jets. There's another disaster fire here. But if you go back to January, I had a chat with Joe Dall'Oisio back in week 18, sort of discussing, like looking ahead to what was gonna happen here. And we did get some good foreshadowing from Joe in terms of what we could look forward to with the Jets this season. So take a look here in the YouTube version, Mike Phillips on YouTube. You can see these clips that were going on here. So I'm going to pop it up on the big screen. People can see what's going on in terms of this situation. But we're going to go back to January episode. I think this is, I have in my notes here, a very early year episode of the week. I think it's like in the 400, early 400s. But this is Joe D talking about the Jets, foreshadowing what could happen with this year.
They're all correct. I mean, everybody got a pass this season because Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Plain and simple,
Yeah.
right? Plain and simple. Um, and when it comes to next year for the New York Jets, if they don't succeed, everyone will be gone. Everyone will be gone. From Salah, I could even see Rodgers being gone. I mean, the pressure's on. The pressure's on. They gotta, he's already talking about needing more weapons and wanting more weapons. This is going to be a huge offseason for the New York Jets.
Yeah. Yeah. I think nailed that one on the head pretty much.
Wow, that was about as close as it could get. And it just goes to show you, he's obviously so passionate about the fan base and you guys, it just goes to show it always drives me nuts that, when you hear from front office people and you hear them talking about the fans as if like the fans don't understand how complicated the business is. Like in that clip alone shows not only what the problem was that year, but what the problem was gonna be this year, and probably had a pretty good suggestion about what the future is gonna look like. So I think sometimes when you're working in it, you're working too closely to it. And Joe just kind of proved that it didn't take, some master 30 years of experience working in professional football to understand what the Jets were going to be and the pressure that was there and what the changes were probably going to end up being.
Yeah, we got two-thirds of the way there already. We have like Salah got fired in October, Joe Douglas got fired in November. TBD on Rodgers. We'll see what happens there. But
Yeah, just real quick on this. Do you think, like, if you, while you watch the Jets right now and you watch Aaron Rodgers' body language and you watch the way he plays, do you think right now, end of December, is Aaron Rodgers playing in the NFL, one, Aaron Rodgers playing for the Jets, two?
it's a very fascinating question here because I don't know if Rodgers wants to play. I think having Devontae play well energizes him a little bit. But I think to me, I think the Jets situation, I think it depends entirely on who the coach is, where they want Rodgers back. And I think the Jets also keep in mind here, I think they have to try and find a way to keep Garrett Wilson happy because like the last thing they can afford is to have him come in here and demand a trade, come in and be sulking for the next year because he's one of the few key young guys who don't have under contract yet.
In your opinion, last quick one on this. Do you think Garrett Wilson wants Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers here, or do you think he wants to be just the guy and those guys need to go and take their, you know, BFF, you know, whole shtick and take it somewhere else? You think he wants a veteran quarterback and a rookie, and he just wants to be the guy?
I think he's fine with Rodgers. I just think like I don't think he wants to go back to like having somebody who not capable of getting the football.
Yeah, I'm curious just from a Jet fan perspective. Does Wilson believe that things are now easier because Adams is here, or does he think that he's not getting to shine because Devontae is the one that's catching the touchdowns?
Yeah. Fascinating question. We'll definitely find out in the next few months or so whether Rodgers stays, Rodgers goes, who ends up coaching the New York Jets. But go ahead to one of the highlights of the year in this area here, the dominance of the Yukon Huskies. And they obviously come on here. They win their second national championship in a row. For the tournament start, I had Vin Parisi from Fox Sports on the podcast, and he gave his insights into how he thought Yukon would fare as a potential back-to-back champ. So let's check out what Vin had to say about that.
No doubt about it. I mean, I think that Purdue has the most, dominant matchup in college hoops with Zach Edey. But, as we've seen the last couple of years with the upsets of FDU and St. Peter's, I think there's ways to combat that. And I think it puts pressure on the other guys, whether they're going to show or not. I think UConn's just the most complete team. I mean, I can't find the weakness. They rebound the basketball, they defend, they shoot the heck out of it from deep. They have elite point guard play. They have size. They have strength. They have elite coaching on the sidelines. They're tough. They're gritty. They have experience. They pass the ball great. They have so many three-point threats that play around clinging on the inside with major size. It's remarkable to lose that much from last year's championship team and, in essence, kind of be better on paper is scary. And they haven't won the Big East tournament since 2011. They haven't been a number one seed since 2009. And this is definitely the best shot, Mike, in all of college hoops that we've seen at a team having best shot at repeating since Billy Donovan's 06, 07 Florida Gators, for sure.
I think Vin nailed it right there, because, I mean, they end up having one of the most dominant runs of the tournament we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, he was one of those years where everybody was like, okay, they are incredible, but are they really going to get it done? And you were kicking yourselves if you decided to try to overthink the scenario. They proved their dominance, and it was really an impressive 2-year run.
Yeah, it certainly was here. And a lot of this stuff for the rest of the year sort of like got backlogged, especially with the stuff with Hard Knocks off season, with the Giants, Jets, the baseball teams getting deep here. Were you a big Hard Knocks off season guy? Check out any of that stuff.
I watched all of it. And I truly enjoyed, I really enjoyed the I enjoyed seeing the behind the scenes stuff with the Giants in terms of Saquon and the conversations that need to be had and how many dollars it was going to take the Giants to at least keep him and what they were willing to do. And remember back then there was all that debate on whether or not he, was going to be how much money was he commanding on the free agency market, not just to come back to the Giants. And it felt like the Giants just played it wrong. And so I really enjoyed that whole sequence of Hard Knocks. And then I really fell for the Chicago Bears. So I was convinced they were going to be a very like annoying 10-7 team, and I got duped. So Hard Knocks sometimes can be really enlightening to the process, but Hard Knocks can also sometimes make you have a very weird view of what the NFL season is going to be like, and it can take weeks to recover from it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the viral moment of Hard Knocks, at least from the Giant perspective, was the conversation that Joe Shane and John Mara had about Saquon leaving here in terms of like, it's going to be going on the internet for years about how like I can't Mara, I would be sick if he leaves for Philly. He's our best player. And I had Alan Austin on the podcast back in July, to talk about that episode and what we learned from it. So let's give his take on the Saquon conversation between Mara and Shane.
It was definitely interesting, and it showed me a couple things. One, that Shane has power. He has power within the organization. It's not one of those, other franchises where the owner calls every final shot. It really felt like Mara's going to discuss, he's going to give his point of view, but he's going to defer to the man he hired for this job. And isn't that what we as football fans often, cry out for?
Yes.
So in that sense, it's interesting to see. You really learned from this episode. The other thing was that Shane was the guy not signing Saquon.
Yeah.
It was very clear that he doesn't value a running back at that price point, and he thinks you can replace that production and he's afraid of the injury history. Now, those are all valid concerns and points to make. I'm just, as a Giant fan, Saquon is our most valuable player. He's our most popular player, and it sucked losing him. So it was a little bittersweet to hear. And, bittersweet in that it's nice to see a manager, a general manager having real power and the owner listening. But also seeing that's the reason my favorite player is not on our team anymore sucks.
Yeah, and that one is not aged well for the Giants here, considering Saquon is basically a top 5 MVP candidate. And like if Josh Allen was not having a superhuman year, he might actually win the award.
I'll say this, listening to your one of your more recent episodes here with Justin Diaz on, I tend to agree, and he's a part of a group of Giant fans who are, I wouldn't say defensive about it, but they have a very different take on that situation. They're like, well, look, even if Saquon's on this team, it's not going to make them automatically a playoff contender. But here's what happens, right? These are all professional athletes. If you have Saquon behind you and somebody who can literally take one handoff and change the course of a game, even if early in the season Saquon wins you two more games, does that keep Daniel Jones? Does that maybe build some momentum? Does that make the defense play harder? Does that free up more options for neighbors to get open downfield? I mean, for a couple $1 million, you let a guy walk that was basically a hero for your franchise. And I don't want to hear about the age thing because he's still in his prime. And you see this all the time. They hand out these contracts and whatnot. So I don't want to speak too quickly on this because I hate the contract that they give him my team's running back. I think he's grossly overpaid. However, Saquon kind of has that special thing about him where players would play better knowing they've got him. And I know the injury history, I get it. I understand it, but look at what he's still able to do. I mean, the Eagles are pretty close to dominant right now. Like they go into every game and you're like, oh, the Eagles probably going to win this game. So I don't know. I feel really bad for Giant fans, and I think that everybody can continue to look at that Hard Knocks. I don't I don't know about Joe Shane. I think he's a guy who looks the part, acts the part, but he might be duping us all. Like he doesn't strike me as a guy who's got like this grand master plan. He took Neighbors because he couldn't figure out a way to move up to get one of the quarterbacks. He wasn't sure about taking one of the quarterbacks that was a reach. He got scared and took the best player available. That's going to set your franchise back. You got to figure out the quarterback situation first and then everything else from there. So that's just my perspective on it.
Yeah, I will say too, like with how things have gone for the Giants this year, I don't know if anyone's gonna be willingly doing the Hard Knocks offseason version of games. The Giants got embarrassed by doing this, the way this year's gone.
I know Amara's got to be, if he really, I don't know what kind of mental capacity he's in or whatnot. And I mean, he's still obviously incredibly smart man, but he's getting older to the point, like, I don't know if he's going to rewatch it or has somebody telling him, like, hey, this made you guys look pretty bad and disorganized. Like, you're not buttoned up as an organization. Um, I don't know. The thing that drove me nuts the most, like if that was my team's GM, the fact that he's like watching so much of Hard Knocks, he's watching like NFL Network in his office. And it's like he's clearly like whether or not you believe what they're saying, but like I would just remember watching those episodes and being like, dude, turn your TV off. You have like a major job to do. You're being paid millions of dollars. You have to construct a winning franchise in New York of all places. And you're just watching Good Morning Football, like, and listening to their opinions, these people that don't matter. Like, if that was my, and I have my own issues with my GM. But I'm saying, like, man, turn your TV off and like dial in, make some phone calls. I don't know. Anyway, that was my reaction to all that too.
To be
Tough,
fair,
tough
they might
watch.
even, to be fair, they might even sort that in post to make it look like he was actually like watching the stuff because this is NFL film production. They may have been pumping themselves up subconsciously.
Maybe. I don't know, but it just seemed like I remember a couple times where he's just sitting in his office in the chair, just like leaning back. And I know it was around the draft stuff and who they were speculating the Giants were going to take, but it just feels like it just feels like he was reactionary instead of saying, okay, here's my full plan. This is how we're going to get from a team who hasn't, post Eli, things have not been great. There have been good moments, and there was a great year of momentum, but you have now sunk a ton of money into certain players on your defense, but you are missing key parts on your offense, and you don't have an attitude. The Giants are missing like what are they? Like what kind of a team are they? Are they a running team? Are they a, you know, crazy passing threat? Do they are they a possession team that wants to play just good defense and run the football, kind of like the Steelers do? Like, what are the Giants right now under Dable? I don't know, but it feels like everybody's just throwing in the towel. And I guarantee you, if Saquon was still here, there may have been a little bit more of a glimpse of hope. So I don't know. For a couple $1 million, what was it that he ended up getting like 14 or 15 and the Giants were only in for like 12 and a half? Like, come
Like that.
on, man.
Yeah, not a good look here. And speaking of not good looks here, I know you are at least casually aware of the Star Wars here. Do you follow the misfortunes of the Acolyte on the internet, or
You
check out
know,
the show?
now in my dad life, I'm a little bit behind, but I'd love to watch and see what some of those highlights were.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there's only one season. It's only gonna be one season. It got canceled here, so give our sister podcast, the Sky Guys, a shout here because we had an emergency episode. Like once the Acolyte got canceled, we had a bit of reaction here. So let's go into late August here, and we find the surprising news that the Acolyte is canceled here. And me, Nick Fred, Pete Conser, we shared our reaction here. Nick had some strong words about where
Hmm.
he felt the show went wrong. So let's take a listen.
And I think this show suffers from what a lot of shows suffer from. It's not just Star Wars. And shows need to stop this. Stop making a show, and let's just say a new IP, let's just say a new show called Doors. Making that up, okay?
Yeah.
Doors goes into their new show and just assumes this is going to be a 6 season show. Like they're signing on with HBO when it's Game of Thrones, where the source material's there. It's not how it works. Make a show, make a season. If it's good, you'll get another season. So this show, although there were some cool things at the end, like, oh, what did Vernesta say to Yoda? What's Plagueis doing? Tell us, because you might not get a chance to tell us in the future. Stop setting up for the future. Rebel Moon's a good example. You split it into two movies. Why?
Yeah.
Make it one movie. Maybe it would have been okay.
Yeah, certainly fair point, Pete. And I know, like, another thing that strikes me too with Nick's point is sort of the idea, like, we heard during the season, the best part of the act, like, you would agree with me, is the Chimere reveal as the stranger, correct?
I think Chimera in general was the best part, not just the
Yep.
reveal, just the character.
Yeah, there was a point in the show. Remember, we discussed this during the episode recap after episode 5 that Leslie Headland said this is initially a season 2 reveal, which means like the pacing of this show was way, way off. And like if something like that was not going to be in the season 1 plan, it's a very poor design.
I agree. I mean, let's call it what it is too, right? I mean, I use Book of Boba Fett as a litmus test of a bad Star Wars show because it literally needed another Star Wars show to come and save it for the last 3 episodes. So the pacing of the Book of Boba Fett was worse. The direction was worse than this. That's why I don't consider The Acolyte the worst show Disney's produced. However, I do think something needs to be said about what Nick said. Give us the answers. Enough of this back and forth. And I understand that, you know, something needs to be left to mystery. And I think you need to hook people in and you want people to watch and keep watching. And there's something to be said about that. However, if you're just going to leave it all on the table to be like, well, if we get renewed for 6 seasons, by season 6, you'll understand everything. It's a harder sell. To me, I'll go, okay, you know, we have a Star Wars podcast. We're invested in Star Wars content. We're going to watch it, right? This is something that we're passionate about. So it's not a problem for us. But for the average Star Wars fan, you need to grab them and you need to make them very excited about that season that came out now.
Yeah, so we have a lot of strong takes on this show not succeeding here. I know it's toxic discourse on the internet in terms of like a lot of nonsense, but it was very crazy. As somebody who has not put the time in yet here, like, what's your perspective on this?
No, and obviously I've made an appearance on Sky Guys, so I would say this, Nikki's overall, without diving into the subject matter, it makes a lot of sense to me that Disney and their, you know, I guess handling of all of these individual Star Wars stories, they have gotten to the point where they think that their credibility based off of the Mandalorian success, they can take the time because they have the audience to do it and they can stretch things out and turn into franchises. Well, you're really diving into like some of the more obscure, really deep cut stuff for true fans. And even the true fans are saying, like, why should I waste my time with this right now if you're not going to give me something to be wowed about? I did feel at various points as I was involved with you guys and Andor and how things were going there. There were plenty of episodes where I'm like, did this really move the plot along? Like I feel like you're just trying to get us to a certain number of episodes. So there are certain episodes that are exciting and things happen, but I feel like Nikki is very far, he's very, on with this thing. He's got a point and it's an important one for the sake of, how Star Wars stories are handled going forward.
Yeah, and we've seen so far the new show Skeletor seems to be following what Nick has said pretty well. So we will see
Yeah.
if they can keep the momentum up for the rest of the season. But we gotta get to the exciting stuff here. We got the playoff stuff with the baseball teams here, and I gotta ask you here. Like, how invested were you? Were you keeping an eye on that doubleheader the Mets had in Atlanta the last day of the regular season to get in the playoffs?
I thought that this was some of the best times to still truly I don't I'm in a weird point where we're kind of getting towards the middle of our lives here, and it doesn't necessarily feel like the people that are getting just into their 20s now care as much about baseball. But for us that are kind of in the prime of our lives, this was a really special year of playoff baseball. So I was absolutely dialed in, and I'm really curious to see which clip you pulled.
Yeah, obviously we talk about game 161 for the Mets where they play that wild doubleheader in Atlanta. They have the big rally in the eighth inning. Diaz gives it up. Lindor hits the home run in the ninth, and they save it so they get in the playoffs here. SNY's Anthony McCarron came on here. He broke down the impact that he felt the clincher had for this team going into the playoffs. We saw they parlayed into a pretty deep postseason run. So let's hear what Anthony had to say about the Met playoff run and the coming from this Lindor clincher.
But look, that game I thought was a microcosm of their season in some ways because if anything, the 2024 Mets have proven they can take a punch and rebound from it. And boy, were they getting pummeled in that game because they looked flat. Spencer Schwellenbach Bach had a lot to do with that, of course. But they looked early on in that game. They looked dead. They looked hopeless for game one, and then all of a sudden they were back and they had a huge inning. A lot of guys contributed after there was a sort of vibe, at least to me, that Francisco Lindor was the only hope that they had to get any offense going in that game. And then everybody contributed. They took that lead, and then Diaz comes in, doesn't cover first base, blows the lead. And then you think, oh my goodness, it's the last trick of the baseball gods to stick it to the Mets in Atlanta that this happens. How tight are they going to be in game two? And they proved over the last week of the season, they don't play well when they're tight because they were tight when they were in Atlanta and when they first got to Milwaukee as well. And then, of course, we get the Lindor moment, the home run. It's a phenomenal story. It might be the greatest regular season game in Mets history. Certainly, Lindor's home run is one of the most meaningful swings of the bat in Mets history, and what a way to clinch it. And look, I mean, who knows what they can do now? I mean, you don't feel like they're a favorite, but I mean, do you really want to play this team?
Yeah, pretty good summation there because I feel like that did springboard this team a lot. And I said at the time, I think it played out here. I think if they had kind of backed in and just had the game 162 given to them, I don't think they get as far in the playoffs they do by winning the way they did.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, if the Dodgers weren't, basically ruining baseball, the Mets, it felt like a year that the Mets were destined to get there. So, I have very strong feelings about, how baseball is being handled because there are some similarities to what's going on in, the golf world as well, where, money talks and that's just kind of how it operates. So, Baseball's always been that way, but it's starting to get a little crazy. So I really found myself, even as a Yankee fan, like if it wasn't going to be the Yankees, I wanted the Mets. The Mets were the story. They proved that you can put together a team that's got core pieces, players playing above their level because they believe in their team and they believe that they can do it. And they were a great story. They were a likable team. How many times in your life you could say like the casual baseball fan was on the side of the Mets and they weren't just, a punchline or oh the Mets can't do it. They won't get there. No, this year's team was a team that fans of other teams could get behind. And that was a special moment for you guys. And I think it's something that you'll probably remember as a Met fan for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah, it's definitely way up there. The whole run was wild. We'll get more, I think, what it out parlay to later. But I also want to touch on here probably the most successful teams of the year here. The New York Knicks, who obviously, have the big playoff run. They remake their whole roster. They do the OG Anunoby trade in January, in late December. They get obviously Mikal Bridges, they get Karl Anthony Towns here. And it all comes back to one thing. And I had Chris Persianen, great NBA guy on the podcast in October. He talked about, in his opinion, this all goes back to Jalen Brunson, and he'll tell you why here in this clip from October 21st.
And then that offseason, the Knicks went, "Oh, wait, this guy's about to be like a lot better." Like we just realized that he's not exploiting the 3-point skill that he has to the extent that he could be. We're going to have him take a bunch more threes and you're going to poop your pants at how crazy of a superstar he is. And then he comes out and he's like a top 10 player. So that happening in free agency for the Knicks left them draft capital. That draft capital was used to overpay in price for Mikal Bridges. Why were they able to do that? Because they turned Barrett quickly in a second round pick into Anunoby, who doesn't need the ball in his hands, who perfectly complemented Brunson and Randall. They took Randall and DiVincenzo, two players that they did not trade for. They just signed with cap space and then extended in the case of Randall. They took one measly first round pick and Keita Bates Diop and turned that into their final infinity stone of Karl Anthony Towns. So for the New York Knicks, it's all fitting, right? They can overpay in picks for Mikal because they didn't give up any picks for Anunoby. And they didn't give up more than one protected first round pick for Towns because they stuck by Randall and extended him when everyone wanted him gone. They let Obi walk to the chagrin of prospect huggers everywhere and enjoyers of fun, fast-paced basketball to get DiVincenzo. They got railed for the DiVincenzo signing. They got railed for the Brunson signing. Oh, you traded for Josh Hart and now you have to pay him 18 million a year. You're screwed. These are all things that were actually said, like unironically. The Knicks just said, we know what we're doing. We have a plan. Just because we don't tell you the plan doesn't mean there isn't a plan. It's actually tampering if we tell you the plan. Watch this. So, like, for me, this all comes back to Brunson. This is all possible because of Brunson. And the same way that the Knicks got a superstar in a different way than most teams and gave up more picks than any other team would have for Bridges because they got Anunoby for no picks. Like, isn't that kind of in sync with how the team is going to work on the court, right?
Yeah, so crazy to think about here, like how fast this Knicks team changed. And like now we've seen that, like they're not consistent. They have one of the greatest offenses in the league. Their defense, is a work in progress. And they have nice they can beat the best team in the league and not nice they just lose to teams like Chicago. But, I think this is a very exciting mix that they have coming together here.
Yeah, and they'll gel. Like they'll probably end up going on, a pretty deep win streak and you can see they've got the pieces. What's interesting about the Knicks is that they, for the first time, the moves that they're making, and you even hear it in that clip too, like the moves that they're making have all worked. I'm not saying they've worked perfectly, but they're not costing them. It wasn't like a horrible return. Because remember, think about how many years as Knick fans, like the trades that just didn't work out, the draft capital that was wasted trying to find that star. But think about all the teams that were built, even the teams that were built around Carmelo and the Knicks never had a complete group of 5 to 6 players that you could put out there and say, this is a legitimate, every single one of them can beat you. I mean, the Knicks have pieced together a team, a formidable team, a team that has veteran experience and knows each other and can play with each other. And they're definitely not a team. I don't think the Knicks are also a team that they need to be the 1 or 2 seed to be a problem in the playoffs. I think going forward, there's not too many teams that are going to want to play them if they're healthy.
Yeah,
So they'll go on the road and they'll punch you in the face.
yeah, for sure. It's fascinating to see how the Knicks go here, and this is a very busy month for New York sports. Also, this is the time the Yankees get to the World Series. First time in the history of this podcast that we had a New York team reach the championship round.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, and we had Anthony McCarron came back on here. He talked about obviously this is the playoffs, where Giancarlo's hitting 1 million home runs. Juan Soto sends to the World Series with the home run in Cleveland. We talked to Anthony McCarron about is it time for Aaron Judge, pull his way here and carry the situation here. So let's see what he had to say about Aaron Judge's potential to take over a series in the World Series.
Yeah, and that's fair. And look, there is pressure on Judge to really come alive in this series. He had some impactful hits, obviously against Cleveland. Uh, you know, but he's really got to like. I think every Yankee fan on the planet is waiting for the Aaron Judge series where he just absolutely goes nuts and hits 3 homers in one game and then has like a walk-off homer in another, makes a sensational catch in another game. Like I think that like I think it'd be great for the sport, to be honest with you, if he took over a series and if this were the series on this type of stage between these, the traditional October rivals. These two teams have met more than any team in the postseason. And I think it would be fascinating for Judge to go off like that. There's always the talk about Aaron Judge doesn't hit in the playoffs. Aaron Judge doesn't hit in the playoffs. And, I think he's had one tremendous series and the Yankees lost to Boston. I think it was in 18, if I'm remembering correctly. But whenever it was. Like this would be a great time for him to just absolutely go bonkers.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for the Yankee fan, he did not go bonkers in this series. And one of the tiring moments of that World Series, especially in Game 5, and the what I mean the clincher for the Dodgers here is well, is that fifth inning, Judge drops a routine fly ball. So the monkey's still on his back, unfortunately for Yankee fans.
Yeah, and look, as a Yankee fan, I'm always going to sympathize and I'm definitely a Judge apologist. Like I'm not going to sit here and say he sucks or this or that. Like that's not in the cards. I think we're lucky to have him. I think he's got game-changing potential when the time comes. And I think that there is that. Everybody knows that if it all just syncs up, he is that piece that teams are looking for that can change a series. He just hasn't done it yet. And I'm dancing around it, but I like to think that this year was lost because of the lack of pitching and the lack of veteran leadership at the back end of the bullpen and being able to close games out. I think it killed a lot of momentum. Um, I think that the Yankees have addressed the issue out there that is after Cole, who do you want to hand the ball to for game 2 and let Cole not come into the next start of a series and feel the pressure because nobody else can get you a win. So um, I think that there's going to be more additions that continue to happen. I think Soto going to the Mets is great for the Mets. I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to produce with that team, but everywhere he goes, he figures it out. But for the Yankees, and I think all Yankee fans would say it, like you can piece together a team around Judge and Stanton. What you can't do is you can't go out there rolling the dice with everybody in your, starting rotation being a question mark or an unknown, and then, just roll the dice with Cole leading the way. Like he needed more help. He needs help. You need to build, Yankees need to have a dominant pitching staff and bullpen, and they're starting to go that way. So,
We'll see how it shakes out here for next year. And a couple more clips here. Got like three, four left on the board. When we wrap up here, a couple things here. Obviously, we're recording on December 19th, a little early ahead of the holidays, but I do think you do happen to catch today all the news about the athletic report about the more Woody Johnson fiascos with the Jets this year, about how like he's checking on guys' Madden ratings when it comes to football values. How his sons are now in the team meetings here. Like Woody cannot get out of his own way.
over the last couple weeks, I had heard bits and pieces of that Woody Johnson is legitimately kind of losing it. I wasn't sure of if all the details were correct because you got to obviously understand what the sources are, but it seems like he's really I never processed that Woody Johnson gets embarrassed when and has that he's not a it seems like there's not a ton of confidence there, and he's expecting that he got all these shiny toys and he expects them now to be perfect, and they're not, and now he is embarrassed by it again, and now he is lashing out. So is that kind of the way that this is all going?
That's a pretty good summation of it so far. And like I'm sure obviously there was embellishment a little bit, because I'm sure like those sorts of time, I'm sure to Joe Douglas, who had definitely an axe to grind with Woody. But we'll go to a clip from when right after Joe Douglas got fired. I was joined by Jake Brown, the host of the Sicko Jets podcast. So he had some great thoughts on Woody Johnson. So one of my favorite clips of the year for sure. So let's listen to what Jake Brown had to say about Woody.
Yeah, Christopher Johnson. We don't know a lot about him. It's been said that the players like him, and they maybe they like him more than Woody. He's a little bit younger than Woody. Like maybe he ends up being better. But the problem is, owners' their egos are too big, and ballers want to be rappers want to be ballers. Ballers want to be rappers. The owner wants to be the baller, and the ballers want to have the money the owners have, and that's it doesn't exactly correlate that way, but like he wants to be like a player. Like he buys the Sauce Gardner kind of chain he wears around his neck. He's in the locker room before and after games. He's making football decisions he should not be making. He's listening to us and people like me on Twitter. His brother used to listen to my old podcast. Like they're listening to a lot of this stuff that's out there. And, they always say when you listen to the fans, you end up with them. Well, when you're an owner, it's hard to, as many tweets as he's getting of sell the team, the guy's got money and an ego that he doesn't want it out of the family. They want to get it right. And I'm not saying he doesn't want to win and he wants to get this right, but he hasn't been able to. He fails in every GM hire, he fails in every head coach hire. And clearly he's failed with the roster because they've made one playoff appearance in 14 years. They haven't made the playoffs in 14 years, I should say. It's a better way of putting it. And they've had one winning record since then. So not only have they been a playoff team, they haven't even been able to be a 500 team. And, I don't know if he's ever going to sell the team, but, everyone thinks that him going overseas means, all right, we're done with him. He's still going to be texting his brother and he's still going to be involved in making decisions. You hope that his focus, though, is more towards whatever politics stuff he's going to do and not the Jets. And, that's what the Jets have to hope for. And then they got to hope that his brother says, hey, whoever GM comes in here, if they end up bringing Phil Savage back in the interim right now, I assume they get someone, a little bit better than that. They need to leave it in their hands and just step away, give them your money. And I think you're seeing that with the Mets. Steve Cohen is letting David Stearns make the baseball decisions, and he's writing the checks. And that's how a strong ownership, GM, and franchise connection works. The owner does not get involved.
Yeah, he hit the nail on the head here. Unfortunately, I think Woody thinks he knows better than Jake Brown does. So I think Woody thinks he's going to keep inserting himself in decisions.
Yeah, no, and that's a real problem. I mean, you're coming from a guy who also is dealing with Jim Irsay, who decided to give Jeff Saturday a head coaching job with no experience in the middle of a season. So, um, owners, they get involved in the football operations. Jerry Jones, good example as well. So, I mean, you're not going to see too many successful franchises that have the owner involved, right? Like you see it's very, very clear. Like, yes, they love football. They're on the field, they're involved, but the best thing an owner can do is exactly that. Hire somebody that you believe that they have a vision, let them do what they're going to do, bring in the staff that they want to bring in, set a timeline of your expectation based off of your current roster. Like I'm giving you 3 years to show me results. Oh, we really stink. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 years to show me those results. Stick to that, put it in writing, put it on the wall, and say, get it done or you're out, and start fresh. And fans, I wish owners were a little bit more, some owners talk a little too much about, you know, how great their franchise is and what it's doing, and even though they're blind to it all. But I wish owners would explain their philosophy on how to be successful. The problem is a lot of the owners that would look to talk haven't been, so they don't know. So, um, Woody could do them himself a lot of favors by looking at the situation, hiring somebody new from a successful process right now, let them do their thing and take a few steps back and take the chain off.
That chain's such a terrible look for him.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Trying way too hard.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple more things down here. We hadn't touched on the hockey situation here. Like what we have seen over the last month or so is a dramatic collapse from the Rangers, who won the President's Trophy and were 2 wins from getting the Stanley Cup. Now that they're a complete dumpster fire here, there's drama every day. There's all sorts of chaos here. Like I had Christopher Russo on, like host of the Sports and Wing Room podcast here, and he weighed in on the Rangers right before the Trouba madness started this year, and we'll check out what he had to say. And unfortunately, I don't think it's aged particularly well because this free fall has continued. So let's go to see what he had to say about the Rangers.
Oh boy.
Jacob Trouba again looks, obviously they wanted to trade him in the offseason. There was a reason for that, but it seems like there are, family issues, not an emergency or anything, but that are keeping him in New York. On top of that, I think, and the truth is, I said it last year too, Keandre Miller just looks irresponsible defensively as of late. And it doesn't quite make much sense to me. I don't know. Mika Zibanejad has been a little bit off. You've got, I've heard things about Ryan Lindgren. I tend to disagree, but that's been sort of the expert consensus that Ryan Lindgren's been off this season. The goaltending has been, Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick can only do so much. Look, I still think this might not be the worst thing for them to falter a little early if they don't really go into panic mode, because the truth is, with what hockey is and what it is like watching the New York Rangers, all you got to do is get in. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the idea of the President's Trophy clearly is not too alluring to anyone. If they're good enough to get in, it's all about conditioning in the last potentially 2 months. So there's a lot of time to go. And the truth is, if you're a Ranger fan, the one team that should concern you more than anyone is the Florida Panthers. The Panthers haven't played that well so far. That's the one team against whom they matched up poorly last season. It seems like every year they go up against a team against whom they don't match up well in the playoffs. The only team against whom they don't match up well. It's the Panthers last year. It was the Devils the year before. It's happened with Bruins, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's still very early. You really cannot hit the panic button yet. They are still, if they are not in the playoff picture, they are on the edge of the playoff picture. And I think that should also show how strong a team they've been in the regular season over the last, not just this era, but going back even a little before COVID to the Lundqvist era. The last 20 years or so, they've been one of the most consistent teams in the league. So I think there may need to be a retool, but you cannot hit the panic button right now.
Well, unfortunately, I think they hit the panic button, and we've seen what's happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're just not able to find any momentum. Win 2, lose 3, win 1, lose 2. It's definitely you know, there's still some time, but it hasn't been fixed yet, is
Yeah.
what we'll say.
Yeah, they're 3-12 their last 15 games, and this has only gotten uglier and uglier and uglier. They have a lot of good teams coming up here. So this could turn to an insurmountable hole pretty quick.
I know, and it's one of those things where, okay, do they have to make a move? Do they have to do something drastic? But I don't know. I think you have to give them the benefit of the doubt based off of how last year went and what they've built in the core of their teams. And some franchises don't, as you said, the panic button is a little bit further a reach than you think. So they're trusting the guys they have in the locker room and see where it nets out.
Yeah. So here, two more things here. Number one here, obviously the big news of the year at this point. Juan Soto leaves the Yankees for the Mets, which is probably one of the biggest seismic landscape shifting things in baseball in some time here. We had an emergency reaction podcast a couple weeks ago after Soto signed here. Martino Pucci and I weighed in on what this means here for the Mets for Soto to come over. So let's go take a listen to that. If Cohen goes to 800, that probably gets it done. That's basically exactly what happened.
That's essentially what happened, yeah, too, because this isn't really in the power of Juan Soto because or the extension side of things, right? With the opt-in. That's sort of really just on the Mets, very similar to the Garrett Cole deal that we saw this year, except there was no extra year given to Cole. He just opted back in, I believe, and just remained within the contract itself. For the Mets, I mean, this is you're paying for 26, 27, 28, 29 and 30 for Juan Soto. Again, that's just a hitter. That's he's going to be 30 when that contract is done. Again, with the type of hitter that he is, he's going to age gracefully for sure. It really just depends upon positionally on where he'll be at DH, first base. Because the move is eventually obviously going to come. I think he'll be able to manage in right field. We'll see what happens in center, and then Nimmo's obviously your left fielder. So again, you're really just now getting what potentially could be the best Met of all time.
Yeah. Well, I think about that here, and like basically, if you look at some of the comps that like people have made to Juan Soto in terms of this situation here, I mean, like the name that's seen the most is modern day Ted Williams, which is crazy to think about.
I think that might be a little bit of a stretch.
In terms, in
I
terms of
know that Met fans are really excited about him. And getting to watch him this past year as a Yankee was a really cool thing. Now, in the lineup, Soto had, I think the more important thing outside of just the stats themselves is the attitude he brings. When he steps in the batter's box, like he looks at the pitchers and he is taunting them. Like he is a confident guy and he sets the tone for your team. And not that the Mets needed that because they were already incredibly gritty last year, but he's going to fit in really well. The only thing that you worry about, and if I'll knock on wood, is you've seen this time after time, right? You saw it with Machado, you see it with plenty of other players. They sign the mega deal, pull a hamstring, and the hamstring turns into a this and into a that, and then he disappears for the majority of the summer. Your team ekes their way in, and then he's rusty going into playoffs. Like Soto, the expectations now are that he's going to do every single thing that he's been doing. Time stops for no man. So if you're saying like the prime of his career is what, 23 to 28? Okay, so yeah, I mean, you're going to get him now for three more full seasons. And then after that, there's the options come in. But all I'll say is I don't know what Soto you're going to get. You're either going to get a guy who becomes the greatest Met of all time or a guy who kind of has the same lasting impression that like Stanton has had with the Yankees, right? He's in your lineup, costs you a lot of money. He's hitting. Now they're very different hitters. Don't get me wrong there, but I'm just saying when Major League Baseball players get that big contract, the returns immediately are very rare, right? Like you saw it with Lindor initially too. Like Lindor went from being like a 310 hitter to like what was he hitting? Like 260,
yeah,
270 something. Like it's natural for them to not. And Soto is in this not because he loved the Mets. He's in it because he wants the cash. So you have to hope and pray that the team around Soto buys into his leadership and continues to say, "You're the guy. We're behind you. Lead the way. Lead the way. Don't sit back. We're counting on you." And if they do that, you're going to win a lot of games. But Soto needs to remain motivated because now he's got the cash.
Yep, that's for sure. Last thing here, obviously, you brought him up earlier. It would not be year of the clip show without Justin Diaz making an appearance in
Oh,
it.
of course.
So we
Great
had,
best guest,
yeah, one of our favorite ranters here on the podcast here, and
the best ranter.
yeah, he had a classic opinion about Saquon Barkley here last week. So you mentioned it earlier. Let's give it to the audience. So this is the last clip here on the clip show. Justin Diaz talking about the Giants losing Saquon Barkley, who he compares to a Rolex. So let's go ahead and talk about why that is.
The Saquon thing, if they kept him, he would not be doing what he's doing now. Maybe they'd have a win more, and I'm not even confident about that. I actually think they'd probably have the same record. And you don't have to look far back to see that. Last year, they were terrible. Saquon couldn't even hit 4 yards a carry, and that's to no fault of his own. A running back cannot carry a bad offensive line, a bad quarterback, no receivers. It was the right move to let him go, but it looks bad when he goes to another team and immediately might legitimately be the MVP. I think Josh Allen will win, but Barkley's going to finish top three, and he's going to win Offensive Player of the Year. So optically, it looks terrible. But I make this analogy a lot, and maybe it might be a little offensive, but I'm just going to say it. If you gave a homeless man $50,000 and said, "Here, get your life together," it would be like a bad team signing an expensive running back that has all these other holes. It would be like that homeless man then going buying a $50,000 Rolex, saying, "Well, it's flashy. I want it." Yeah, it's a nice thing to have, but it's not going to turn your life around. And then if you took that Rolex and gave it to an executive, a top level executive, and then that guy's thriving, then people say that homeless man should have bought the Rolex. Look, that executive's thriving and he got a lot of compliments on his Rolex. His life was already in order. That's just an enhancer. Saquon Barkley, the Eagles, they were a Super Bowl. They made the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Last year, they made the playoffs. Saquon's a Rolex that they got, and it's enhancing their lives because they have an elite offensive line. That's what a top running back can do. It can make a good team better. It cannot make a very bad team. It literally basically makes no difference for a very bad team.
Yeah, so I think that the Saquon Rolex things that live in my memory banks for quite a few years.
Yeah, and the only other scenario you can think about is if they had extended Barkley further and then maybe was able to trade him, get something back for him. I don't know what you could get for him other than, but there's other things at play here for Justin the only thing I'll say, and he's an incredibly smart guy and a good ranter in his own right. But if you're a fan base, right, and you are already going to lose you're going to lose every game except for two, at least you can still show up wearing your Barkley jersey and believe in him and not have to look at the Jumbotron inside MetLife and see Saquon scoring for the Eagles. And at the end of the day, Justin, like it's not money out of your pocket, right? So, your franchise is not paying a ton of, I mean, now they are with Burns and a few others, but like it wasn't like they couldn't afford him at all. I think that the thing that Giant fans, and I love them all dearly. I grew up my family was season ticket holders for the Giants. Um, we went to a lot of games. I feel like a close kindred spirit to Giant fans. There's that moment though, right? Like your franchise, when everything looks bad, you can get those special moments. We get one life, right? Like going to see just lost an entire season of misery. You have nothing to look forward to, right? At least you still would have had Saquon, and it only would have cost you an extra $2 million. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at it all, like, okay, yeah, it's you're a homeless franchise or whatever he wants to call them with a shiny Rolex, but then why'd you take Neighbors, right? Like he's a shiny Rolex. How's a rookie wide receiver gonna fix your franchise? I mean, like, there were other things to do there. So at least you would have had two Rolexes, and three if you include Burns. It's like I don't know. The Giants, I think that Giant fans are finding ways to like process and grieve over Barkley, but like it was the difference. I'm pretty sure if we go back to Hard Knocks, it was like they were at 12.1 and the Eagles were at like 13-3 or something. I don't know. It was a very small margin to bring Saquon back and match him and make him a Giant. And all it would have done is if you got lucky and fixed the quarterback situation, if a veteran quarterback got released or there was every year there's those crazy situations. Look at Sam Darnold is leading a playoff team, right? Like these things. Russell Wilson is a Steeler leading them through. Like you can make you can find the quarterback situation quickly, and if you have those Rolexes around it, you can become a wealthy person quick. So maybe this will be a clip for next year's clip show. But that's my response to Diaz is if you're homeless, wouldn't you want as many Rolexes as you can?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. This sums up the year pretty much here that like the baseball teams were great. The Knicks had a fun run. The Rangers were up and then down. The football just stunk. That was basically New York sports for 2024.
and people always ask me like, "Aren't you from New York? Why don't you like more New York teams?" And I said, "Well, I like the Yankees, but no, I my Grizzlies are doing exactly what I expected them to do. Nobody cares about that, but they're having a phenomenal year. The Colts are an embarrassment of a franchise, but I won't turn away, and the Maple Leafs are playing great. So I'm okay being a a very obscure sport fan, but hey, I've at least I'm in a little bit better scenario. But I would say of any sport team right now to be most excited about, I think you got to be a Met fan. So good for you guys.
Yeah, the Knicks are up there too.
Yeah. Oh, there's great promise there, but immediate like excitement going into a season from
Yeah,
the start. You got to be excited as a Met fan.
yeah, I am too. I'm excited to see what happens there, and we'll also let you know I am holding an over ticket on your Grizzlies win total this year, so I'm hoping that the start plans out.
Oh, well, I'm telling you, they shoot the ball incredibly well. I mean, I think the thing people are forgetting is just how special John Morant is. I
Yep.
mean, even with him, quote unquote, not dunking, and dealing with some injuries, he is one of the most special players that will ever play the game of basketball. The ability to handle the ball and fly through the air. I know like you're not going to stay up late to watch, Grizzlies Lakers at 10 o'clock on Friday night or whatever it is, 10:30 tip. But man, like t just watch the Grizzlies play basketball. It is insane.
Yeah, we'll see what happens here going forward. Dan, thanks for coming on here. I really appreciate all the time. If you want to find on social media, I can do that.
You can follow me at DMart207 on Twitter. I have been tweeting at Jim Irsay and at the Colts official Twitter handles quite a bit, or X handles, um, getting quite a bit of response and probably will be blocked pretty soon. There is a cult fan. I'll leave you with this thought. There is a cult fan who is threatening to defame the Peyton Manning statue outside of Lucas Oil Stadium if Chris Ballard, the GM, is not fired. And it is making some very interesting waves on social media. And it is a fascinating tactic by the guy, but I'm just sitting back with the popcorn, just like, holy moly, what is going to happen at the end of this season? Because there's something to be said for being a great team or a horrible team, but it's the worst spot to be in is to be where we are, which is we're probably going to be 8 and 9
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah. And the NBA, they call it the mushy middle. You don't want to be there.
Nope, you don't get the draft pick, but you don't get to win. So we're going to be sitting there. We're going to be like the 14th pick, and it's going to do nothing.
Yeah.
So,
All right, we'll see what happens there, Dan. Thanks again.
no, this was a lot of fun. I loved the clip show. Great, great stuff this year, and cheers to a 2025